Amani Okafor was absorbed in her old, worn-out textbook, squinting at the lines as she sat in a tiny house in one of Lagos's back alleys. Outside, the sounds of engines and the screams of children filled the air, but in her mind echoed a single sentence: if you don't work, you won't escape this life. In a small one-room home, a family of 6 struggled to get by. Her father spent most of his day working in a factory, while her mother tried to support the household by selling fruits at the street corner. Their daily earnings barely allowed them a warm bowl of soup for dinner, and sometimes not even that. Since she was a child, Amani had been different. While other kids played, she would rummage through broken encyclopedias trying to digest the information inside. Once she examined a decaying orange bought from the market, scrutinizing the mold, and asked her mother, "Why is this happening?" Her mother, smiling and stroking her hair, had replied, "You're very curious, my dear. I hope one day you find answers to your questions." However, growing up on the narrow streets of Lagos was not easy for a curious girl. Throughout her school life, she faced many obstacles. Even her teachers often built walls instead of offering support. One day, her biology teacher wrote her name on the board and spoke sternly, "Amani, do you want to be a doctor? The world of science is a tough place, and it's nearly impossible for someone as extraordinary as you to succeed. Nursing would be a safer choice. Look, your mother is in business. You could do something like that. Be realistic." Some students giggled while others bowed their heads. But Amani's eyes were resolute as she tried to suppress her inner anger and took a deep breath. That day, when she returned home, she held her mother's hands and whispered, "One day I will prove them all wrong." However, one of life's greatest blows struck soon after. When her father died in an industrial accident at the factory, the family faced immense devastation. As financial struggles escalated, her mother began working even harder, sometimes without resting for days. While Amani continued attending school during the day, she helped her mother at night. The fatigue and stress weighed heavily on her, but her passion for science fueled her determination. Attending university felt like a distant dream, yet her resolve and her mother's sacrifices never allowed her to abandon that hope. That dream began to turn into reality when Amani received a scholarship and was accepted into the faculty of medicine at the University of Lagos, one of Nigeria's top schools. However, upon arriving, she realized the challenges were far from over. As the only black female student in her class, she constantly had to prove herself. Professors would often direct extra questions at her, and her peers expected her to work harder than others. While some classmates appreciated her determination, others eyed her with suspicion. Yet Amani refused to accept this situation. Despite every hardship, she continued on her path in science and seized every opportunity to expand her knowledge. One night, while sifting through old medical journals in the library after microbiology class, a headline caught her attention: "The Evolution of Viruses and Future Pandemics." A feeling within her suggested that humanity would soon face a significant outbreak. As she examined the pages carefully, she saw how humanity had grappled with past pandemics and how scientists had fought back. In that moment, she questioned her role in it all. At that time, she had no idea how this would intersect with her own fate. But from that night on, she committed herself to virology and contributing to humanity. Years later, while working as a doctor at a large institute, she was about to become the first person to detect a deadly virus. More importantly, she would soon find out that the battle to inform the world about it would be the greatest challenge she had ever faced. Amani started working at a prestigious medical research institute as a virologist, yet although it appeared to be a triumph, the challenges were far from over. Upon beginning her work there, she faced blatant discrimination. Colleagues not only viewed her as inadequate, but also barred her from significant projects, belittled her ideas, and overlooked her contributions. She found it difficult to speak up in meetings, and her suggestions were often quickly dismissed. As Amani took on more and more responsibilities, she felt increasingly unrecognized and stymied in her progress. Over time, her workload intensified. While other researchers at her level handled several projects a week, she was expected to work nearly double that amount. In meetings, her ideas were ignored, and she faced open derision from her superiors. When it came time for her to earn a promotion, managers continually made excuses. Phrases like, "You're not experienced enough yet," or "There's no suitable position right now," were just a few examples of the obstacles placed in her way. However, as she watched her peers work less yet receive more recognition, her sense of justice was shaken. Yet she fought to maintain the determination within her. But Amani was not going to give up. One day, while conducting experiments in the lab, she noticed the emergence of a new virus. This virus was unprecedented, with a rapid mutation rate and the potential for swift spread, marking it as a lethal pathogen. As she analyzed the data, she realized it posed a global threat. However, when she reported this to her supervisor, the reaction left her disheartened. "Let's put this on hold for now. There's not enough evidence yet and we don't want to cause unnecessary panic. We have more pressing projects at the moment." Amani could hardly believe her colleagues' and superiors' indifference. The data was clear, and the potential for the disease to evolve into a global pandemic was strengthening daily. While she gathered new evidence in her lab, her superiors continued to downplay the situation in meetings. The world was on the brink of a significant threat, yet no one seemed to take her seriously. She realized that remaining silent was not an option, and began to search for different avenues. Amani meticulously reviewed laboratory records and prepared a comprehensive report detailing the virus's spread rate, mutation characteristics, and potential mortality rates. However, when she presented this report to her supervisor again, she was met with the same apathetic response. "These are just theoretical calculations. We can't act without more concrete evidence. We have more urgent tasks at hand." Amani realized that she wouldn't receive any support from the Institute anymore. She decided to reach out and share her findings with a broader audience. Quietly, she sent a message to Dr. Eleanor Whitmore, an old connection at the World Health Organization. In her message, she outlined the risks posed by the new virus, the mutation rate, and potential mortality rates, mentioning that the Institute's management was downplaying this threat and attempting to obstruct her research. As soon as Dr. Whitmore read the message, she took the situation seriously. First, she reviewed the data alongside her team, confirming the accuracy of Amani's findings. Subsequently, she organized an urgent meeting within the World Health Organization to inform authorities. She reached out to Amani, saying she wanted more information. This development marked the beginning of a global escalation, signaling that a major health crisis was imminent. Dr. Eleanor Whitmore was a senior epidemiologist and public health expert at the World Health Organization, renowned for her strict demeanor and unwavering discipline. Having studied at both Harvard and Oxford, she played a crucial role in managing several outbreaks. Her impact on global health policies was significant, and she had direct connections with high-level officials. Upon receiving Amani's message, Eleanor immediately took the situation seriously. She carefully examined the data Amani presented and quickly verified its accuracy. However, she believed she needed more evidence and direct information from the field before escalating the matter to official authorities. Thus, she set out to arrange a secret meeting with Amani. Eleanor planned to visit the Institute under the guise of conducting field research, utilizing her diplomatic connections to enter as an independent observer. The official reason for her visit would be to supervise new research projects, but her actual goal was to meet Amani face-to-face to understand the true extent of the situation. When she arrived at the Institute, she noticed the atmosphere was uncomfortably tense. Amani's colleagues avoided talking to her, while the management imposed strict rules to limit her movements. Many people at the Institute had been led to believe that Amani's warnings were exaggerated or had been forced into denial. During this process, Amani had been isolated and pushed away from her research. Access to her routine experiments had been restricted, and laboratory resources were allocated to other projects. Some colleagues even began to avoid speaking to her. The management accused her of trying to incite panic and threatened her scientific reputation. In a clandestine meeting late one evening, Eleanor and Amani finally met in an old laboratory area at the back of the Institute. Amani presented all her documents to Eleanor and detailed the pressure she had been under. "They're trying to silence me, Dr. Whitmore, but we need to act before this virus gets out of control. Eleanor could read the desperation and determination in the young scientist's eyes. She decided to take immediate action. She would present Amani's findings and laboratory data to the World Health Organization, pressuring governments and global health authorities to highlight the seriousness of the situation. However, this was just the beginning. The Institute's management would attempt to cover up Amani's reports and even engage in various efforts to undermine her reputation. At this critical moment, a laboratory technician at the Institute, one who had belittled Amani's research, decided to examine some samples without using protective gear. "This isn't something to be exaggerated," he scoffed. Within a few days, he began to exhibit severe headaches, high fever, and respiratory distress. Initially, his colleagues misinterpreted his symptoms as a common flu. However, as the hours passed, his condition deteriorated rapidly. By the time he was admitted to the hospital, he had begun to show signs of organ failure, and doctors were unable to determine the cause before he died shortly thereafter. This death instilled a great deal of fear within the Institute. Nevertheless, the management continued to conceal the incident and disregarded Amani's findings. They attempted to downplay the situation with explanations like stress-related complications or pre-existing health issues. But Amani and Eleanor knew this was no mere coincidence. The virus had already begun to spread. Yet the Institute's president still refused to take the situation seriously. When he called a meeting with Amani and Eleanor in his office, he glanced at them dismissively and spoke derisively, pursing his lips in mockery. "So you're telling me we need to go save the world based on a few laboratory data? Have you both panicked over something that doesn't warrant such alarm? Academics like you always over-dramatize to prove a point. We are conducting serious research here, not playing games." Amani's fists clenched. Eleanor pushed the file across the table toward the president. "This isn't just a guess. One of the lab technicians contracted the virus and died. How many more people have to die before you take action?" The president leaned back in his chair without even picking up the file. He rolled his eyes and smirked slightly. "That technician was careless. We don't have clear evidence linking this to the virus. And if you dare speak to the press or the WHO about this, you should know your career will be over. We're here to focus on our work. My advice to you is to put this nonsense aside and continue performing your assigned tasks." Amani felt a surge of anger boiling within her. Eleanor's face was flushed as well. The president turned his gaze away and resumed, scanning through documents on his desk while waving them out of the door as if to dismiss them. "Now return to your work. Don't waste any more of my time." Eleanor grabbed Amani by the arm and led her out of the room. Once in the hallway, Amani took a deep breath, but her expression was now clear. They would not allow the president to cover this up. Eleanor was in full agreement. "This isn't the end, Amani. We need to involve the WHO. We're going to make a more significant move." Amani nodded. They both understood that remaining silent was no longer an option. The Institute was like a simmering volcano ready to erupt. With the virus spreading, the management concealing reality, and people facing death. This fight had transformed into not just a scientific one, but a moral battle as well. They had no time to waste. They needed to take a significant step to activate the WHO. Despite the threats from the Institute president, Amani and Eleanor had to act. While silence reigned within the Institute, the technician's death served as a stark warning. However, the management continued to conceal the truth. Amani and Eleanor began to devise a plan to provide more evidence to the WHO. Eleanor needed additional information to validate the developments occurring at the Institute. While Amani and Eleanor attempted to access laboratory records in secret, they learned that another technician was starting to show similar symptoms. This was no longer a coincidence. The virus had begun to spread uncontrollably. Eleanor decided to reach out to a journalist friend to leak the situation. Acting as an anonymous source, Eleanor sent a report about the developments at the Institute to a global scientific news platform. Before long, the news made headlines. "Mysterious new virus. Researchers warn of a major threat." The president of the Institute flew into a rage upon seeing the report. Institute president strikes back. When the president realized that Amani and Eleanor had leaked this information, he quickly took action. He restricted access to the laboratory data, increased security protocols, and put Amani under investigation. He openly threatened the staff, stating, "Those responsible will lose their jobs." Amani had now become a target. Her computer access was suspended, her entry to all samples in the lab was revoked, and upper management began pressuring for her removal from the institute. Yet, Eleanor was determined not to back down in this fight. She rallied to create a team from the WHO and began advocating for an official investigation. The situation had now escalated to an international level. Just then, the feared scenario unfolded. Another staff member at the institute had traveled to another city to spend the weekend with his family. But he too had fallen ill. Within 3 days, he was hospitalized, showing signs of lung failure. When doctors examined this case, they realized it matched the symptoms of the virus Amani had previously described. This was the first evidence that the virus had escaped the institute's confines. Time was now running short for Amani and Eleanor. As the virus spread, it was inevitable that the management would lose control. However, the institute's president was still trying to conceal the truth. Amani and Eleanor sent a direct warning to the WHO, stating, "Without immediate intervention, a global disaster is inevitable." Remaining silent was no longer an option. Thanks to Amani and Eleanor's courage, there was a chance to avert a significant crisis. But this required taking even greater risks. The WHO's initial response was swift and severe. As a result of Eleanor's pressures, senior officials at the WHO demanded an official statement from the institute's management. However, the institute's president continued to downplay the situation. He released a press statement claiming that the news circulating in the media was misleading and aimed at inciting unnecessary panic. This statement sparked a strong backlash within the scientific community. Meanwhile, Amani was devising a plan to reach the latest samples in the laboratory. Although the president had cut off all her permissions, she still had loyal colleagues inside. One of them bypassed the lab's security protocols to deliver the latest analysis data to Amani. This data revealed that the virus was far more contagious than previously believed and had begun mutating. With this new information, Eleanor promptly informed the WHO again. This time, the WHO officials decided to take a more aggressive step by sending an official inspection team to the institute. However, the institute's president resorted to various diplomatic maneuvers to delay the inspection team. He closed the laboratory under the pretense of temporary maintenance and began to destroy many critical documents inside. At this moment, initial cases of the virus began to appear internationally. As Amani had warned from the start, the virus had spilled beyond the institute's walls. The number of patients dying from an unidentified respiratory illness was rapidly increasing. When the first cases were confirmed in Europe and America, the situation escalated from a local crisis to a global threat. Amani and Eleanor had reached a point of no return. They needed to take significant risks to reveal the truth to the world. With Eleanor's connections at the WHO, they managed to have a direct intervention team sent, yet the president was still attempting to hide the truth and maintain his power. Amani and Eleanor now knew they were not alone in their fight against the institute. However, as the virus continued to spread, their time was running thin. News that the WHO's official inspection team was on its way to the institute spread quickly, but the institute's president made aggressive moves instead of admitting that the research was out of control. He tightly monitored the entrances and exits of the laboratory, threatened the scientists working inside to remain silent, and fired some of them. Amani was one of these individuals. She was forcibly removed from the lab and completely stripped of her access to the building for security reasons. However, this would not be enough to deter her. Eleanor organized a confidential conference call with the WHO and presented a report detailing the pressure within the institute. She shared the data Amani had gathered with WHO experts. Now, the global health authorities were also beginning to harbor doubts. In their first official statement, the WHO announced, "While there is no definitive proof yet, an independent investigation has been initiated," informing the public. Following this announcement, media outlets and civil society organizations began to pursue the issue. Prominent newspapers and television channels highlighted Amani and Eleanor's warnings under the banner, "Is a new and deadly pandemic starting?" The first wave of panic surged among the public. People demanded more information from health officials, and governments called for the WHO to be more transparent. Meanwhile, one of the scientists at the institute was hospitalized for unknown reasons. He died within a few days due to respiratory failure. When health officials arrived at the hospital, they intended to investigate whether this case was linked to the virus that had emerged at the institute. Yet, the management attempted to classify this case as a pre-existing condition and tried to hide the cause of death. But the truth could not be hidden. A young doctor at the hospital anonymously shared details of the case on social media. This is not a typical pneumonia case. This person was a scientist working at the institute and played a critical role in the research there. This message was shared millions of times, inciting a massive public outcry. The institute president found himself cornered. Realizing that he could no longer control the situation, he began discussions with government officials to indefinitely postpone the CHO inspection team's visit. However, Eleanor and Amani were a step ahead. They submitted the data directly to the WHO's headquarters and the United Nations Health Council. This initiative disrupted the president's plans. The WHO demanded emergency access to the institute and announced that a crisis team composed of independent experts would be sent directly to the institute. This move also placed government officials in a difficult position. Concealing the truth had become nearly impossible. Amani and Eleanor's struggle was finally bearing fruit. But now the virus was no longer just a laboratory problem. Cases were rapidly escalating on a global scale, and the world was heading toward a new pandemic. Big questions remained unanswered. Could this virus be stopped? And if so, would they have enough time? When Amani realized she faced the risk of losing crucial data at the institute, she made a significant move. She secretly sent some of the first samples of the virus, which had been discovered, to her former university friend Dr. Samuel Carter, an expert in medical research. Samuel worked at a private lab in America and specialized in drug development. Amani knew that by sending this information, she was taking a huge risk, but she had no other choice if she wanted to stop the virus's spread. Once Samuel received the samples, he quickly organized his team and began a detailed analysis. Initial tests indicated that the virus had a high potential to mutate. Samuel and his team began making rapid progress in deciphering the virus's genetic structure to develop a possible treatment. Samuel started working on the samples and soon managed to analyze the virus's structure. Keeping in regular contact with Amani, they examined the virus's genetic sequencing and began developing a prototype drug for potential treatment. However, the virus was mutating, and their time was limited. Researchers in Samuel's lab were intensely conducting tests to understand how the drug responded to different mutations. While promising results emerged in the early stages, the virus's variation across different geographies created uncertainty about the drug's effectiveness. Therefore, Amani and Samuel's team were racing against time to transform the drug into a broad-spectrum antiviral. Meanwhile, the WHO and the United Nations Health Council gained forced access to the institute due to the evidence presented by Amani and Eleanor. The inspection team entered the institute and reviewed the records, documenting that the management was concealing evidence and attempting to hide the virus's emergence. This development led to the institute president's removal from office and the initiation of an international investigation against him. During this process, the prototype drug developed by Amani and Samuel was prioritized for testing by the WHO. Scientists worldwide united to support this effort, and accelerated clinical trials were launched. Independent laboratories conducted intensive studies to confirm the drug's effectiveness, while the WHO and governments worked to increase production capacity through global cooperation. Some countries implemented strict quarantine measures to protect the public, while preparations for a large vaccination campaign were rapidly underway. As efforts to control the virus's spread intensified, Amani's years of struggle finally began to pay off. The first successful drug trials led to the recovery of infected patients and helped reduce fatalities. This development resonated across the globe. After several months of intense effort, the drug received worldwide approval and was dispatched for distribution. Global health organizations, governments, and scientists collaborated to make the drug accessible worldwide. The outbreak was brought under control, cases rapidly decreased, and death rates dropped to nearly zero. The virus had ceased to pose a significant threat to humanity, marking a triumph for modern medicine and the scientific community. Amani, Eleanor, Samuel, and their team were honored with a significant global award. Amani was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine for her tenacity in the scientific community and her resolve in identifying and addressing the virus. They were also recognized with the Global Health Achievement Award by the WHO and the UN. Furthermore, the team received widespread recognition from the international scientific community and was awarded special accolades from many countries. Their success was celebrated as a historical turning point, demonstrating how modern medicine and scientists can combat global threats. As the awards were presented at a grand ceremony, when Amani stepped onto the stage, she turned to the crowd and said, "Science is not just about experiments conducted in laboratories. True science rises in the hands of those who never give up searching for the truth, fight for justice, and push the limits for humanity." Our presence here today is proof that science is built not only on theories, but also on courage. Amani's name was now etched in history. She was not just a scientist, but a hero who sought the truth in the light of science, fought for justice, and battled to save the future of humanity. Her story would be told for generations as evidence of how the fusion of science and courage could change the world. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more content like this, and leave a comment.